All right, believing in nothing. This, which is actually, if you sit and think about that, that's a very hard thing to do. Believe in nothing. First of all, getting the idea of nothing right in your mind is that, I mean, that's what meditation is really. Uh, that quietness, that stillness of mind, because nothing only exists with no thought. And then nothing still doesn't exist. That's the point. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see what he has to say about this here. Jaima. Believing in nothing. In our everyday life, our thinking is 90% self-centered. 99%. Okay, 99% self-centered. Why do I have suffering? Why do I have trouble? I discovered that it is necessary, absolutely necessary, to believe in nothing. That is, we have to believe in something which has no form, no color, something which exists before all form and colors appear. This is a very important point. No matter what God or doctrine you believe in, if you become attached to it, your belief will be based more or less on a self-centered idea. Do you find that to be true? You know, it is true in some sense, because this idea of relationship always involves the ego, right? But that's not the important thing because, you know, as a Buddhist, they've only got this path, this path of Advaita. In Vedanta, we've got the four paths, and so there's different elements to the scaffolding in each of the paths that make them work. You know, in Buddhism, you get a lot of the nothing idea, but the love idea is absent. You know, is not there because it's the path of jnana, and so it's dry, as it were. You know, that's what Thakur used to say when he used to see those sadhus who were gyanis. He'd be like, "Oh, mother, don't make me a dry sadhu." So, you know, he wanted that wonderful feeling of love, that wonderful feeling of connection with the divine. And that connection, that love that grows between you and the divine is, in fact, the goal. You know, in bhakti, the goal and the path are one. And so it's just a different approach. And so when he says something like this, we have to know it's because that's his practice and he's centered in that practice. And that, yes, in bhakti, definitely the ego is there. We're not trying to eliminate ego. We're doing a different function. We're trying to ripen the ego. And we're ripening that ego by constant association with a love that's pure and constant association with a love that's perfect and unconditioned. And through that awareness and that contact with our chosen ideal, we ripen, the ego ripens, which basically means that it gets motivated by our true nature. It gets created, it manifests from our true nature. And then at the end, the ego that's ripened is easily left aside because the love that has grown between you and your chosen ideal becomes the thing itself. And so ego gets absorbed in it, into a samadhi. So he's just talking from a different path here. If you're practicing bhakti in there, always keep that in mind. You know, that it's just a different path, but it's even more effective. Actually, bhakti is even more effective than this path because this path is so difficult. I was reading that. It's funny. I was reading that just 10 minutes ago in the Gospel, where Thakur is talking about the path of jnana, and you know, he has deep respect for it, and it's beautiful. But he says, "Boy, that's a difficult path in this day and age. You know, it's very hard to succeed in that path." And he says, "Bhakti for this age, of course, is the fastest and most effective." So now that we've propped up bhakti, make sure we understand we're not in competition with bhakti, that we're not countering bhakti. We're describing a separate path, a different path here. No matter what God or doctrine you believe in, if you become attached to it, your belief will be based more or less on a self-centered idea. You strive for a perfect faith in order to save yourself, but it will take time to attain such perfect faith. You will be involved in an idealistic practice. In constantly seeking to actualize your ideal, you will have no time for composure. But if you are always prepared for accepting everything we see as something appearing from nothing, knowing that there is some reason why a phenomenal existence of such and such form and color appears, then at that moment you will have perfect composure. And there's no reason that you can't sit and do this practice even. Thakur, it's funny because Thakur only mentions it so far. I've only found it once in the gospel, this path of Jnana Bhakti or Bhakti Jnana. He just mentions its existence. He just says some people like the path of Bhakti Jnana, and then he never says anything else about it. When I read that sentence, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. That's exactly what I would love to see. And then I can't find any more instruction on the path of Jnana Bhakti. But for me, it's practicing jnana with the presence of the beloved in the mind, that the stillness is Om in a Jnana Bhakti practice. It's not an emptiness of mind, it's an Om. It's because even emptying the mind, there's still an I wanting to empty a mind. So you can be equally critical from both sides. So just do your best. Follow your inner guru. Just ask Mother before each time for guidance, to ripen, to make things proper. So he says, if you're always prepared for accepting everything, but if you are always prepared for accepting everything we see as something appearing from nothing, knowing that there is some reason why a phenomenal existence of such and such form and color appears, then at that moment, you will have perfect composure. And that's this practice of watching your thought and becoming very aware, because everything is thought. All objects are thought by the time we have an experience with them. And so when you do still your mind, and when you're doing that practice of watching the mind, you do see these thoughts come out of nowhere. It's very difficult. I don't know if it's even possible. I certainly haven't been able to find the source of a thought. They seem to just arise, and they come from nowhere. And if you don't pay attention to them, or if you don't attach to them, if you don't put a me and mine with them, then they pass away just as peacefully. So they kind of come out of the vapor, appear before you, and then disappear into the vapor again. It's whenever you have a me and mine, that's my thought, or I like that, or you relate it to your ego somehow. Ooh, that's a good thought. Oh, I'm having a great meditation. Any of those very subtle attachments, that thought will hold itself in front of you. And that holding in front of you immediately activates related thoughts, what we call samskaras, that come up that are related to that thought and surround that thought. And when that happens, that's when you create a state of mind. That's when you create a mood. That's when you create a disposition. That's when you create an attitude. And ultimately, it's where we create our personality. Our personality is a very intricate, crystalline structure of these attachments, me and mine, combined with a myriad of thoughts and samskaras. And so we create this wonderful crystal bowl, and literally we run around holding it out in front of us, showing the whole world constantly. This is me. This is everything I like and don't like, everything I think is funny, all this kind of stuff. And we dance around, the bowl becomes the center of our life. Our crystalline structure of personality becomes what we are. And so that's why this important. He's talking about this composure. This composure is standing in the self, standing in that silent part of the inner shrine, and observing the coming and going of all things, not collecting them, not relating them to yourself, not owning them, not preferring them, and not being adverse to them, just letting it come out of the nothingness and return to the nothingness. That's that state of composure. That's the state of non-identity. It's freedom, because at that point you can be anything, and you are anything and everything. It's all contained equally within you. When you have a headache, there is some reason why you have a headache. If you know why you have a headache, you will feel better. But if you do not know why, you may say, oh, I have a terrible headache. Maybe it's because of my bad practice. If my meditation or Zen practice were better, I wouldn't have this kind of trouble. If you understand conditions in this way, you will not have perfect faith in yourself or in your practice until you attain perfection. You will be busy trying and trying. You will be You will be so busy trying that I'm afraid you will have no time to attain perfect practice. So you may have to keep your headache all the time. All right, well, what he's really saying there is that when you take up a thought and you put it into the mind and you begin thinking about that thought, you're in the whirlpool at that point. You're in the mind. You're identified with mind. When you're trying to figure out something's story, that's what you're doing. You're creating its story. Its story is pulling in its past. Its story is pulling in its future. Its story is defining its relationship with you in the present moment. So any time that you take up any of those things, especially your faults or your problems in meditation, if you're having a problem meditating, if you don't just sit with that and let it be there, but rather take it up and think, oh God, I can't meditate today. Why is it so difficult? And then you just bring in everything. You open the door and all the animals come into the house. then you've got trouble. You've got problems. And so if you're having a bad meditation, don't attach to it. Don't let that thought, which is just a thought amongst all the other thoughts, don't let that thought become a defining thought, meaning don't attach a me and mine to it. Don't relate it to yourself. And then the thought of a bad meditation will arise and it will disappear. And you'll have a good meditation. But don't think about that either. Just be. Always just be. Let the world be. That's non-attachment. That's living in freedom. Is accepting the world as it is, knowing that it's nothing but an appearance in vapor for a moment, and then a disappearance, letting it be that, and letting it, well, I don't know, let's not go there. But you can take the bhakti practice and let it tell you the story of the beloved. That's a nice. What I mean by that is when Thakur saw that English boy with his body folded in three parts, like Krishna playing the flute. Suddenly he's absorbed in divine love. So he's watching the rising and falling of these appearances. And he's recognizing his beloved in them, the reflection of God in them, the reflection of self in them. So you can do it that way. That's a bhakti practice. Otherwise, the jnana practice is just to hear just Om, and it rises and it falls. It rises and it falls. There's not much to do with you in it. So this idea of getting involved in the thinking, he says, this is a rather silly kind of practice. The kind of practice will not work. But if you believe in something which exists before you had the headache, and if you know the reason why you have the headache, then you will feel better naturally. To have a headache will be all right, because you are healthy enough to have a headache. If you have a stomach ache and your stomach is healthy enough to have pain, but if your stomach becomes accustomed to this poor condition, you will have no pain. That is awful. You'll be coming to the end of your life from a stomach trouble. And what he's kind of alluding to there, quite possibly anyway, where this mind went anyway, is this notion of losing awareness. If your stomach trouble continues on to the point where you no longer even recognize it or think about it, you're in trouble. Why are you in trouble? Well, you're in trouble because you have a very deep attachment that you're no longer aware of. You've become numb. You've lost some consciousness. There was a great story I read. I don't remember where I read it. It's either in the gospel or some boys. Anyway, a couple of brahmacharis get rather unruly and they smoke marijuana. And another Swami becomes aware of it and is furious at them and really feels that they should probably be expelled, or they should be at least somewhat punished for that. And so he goes to tell, I think it's Maharaj, that Brahmananda, that these monks, these boys, have smoked marijuana. And so the Swami calls them in and just talks to them, just asks them, oh, did you see you've done this? Yes, we've done this. Oh, I see. And how was it? And he went through the whole thing, and just has a conversation with them about them and sends them away. Doesn't punish them at all. And so the other monk who had caught them is incensed. Maharaj, what is this? You didn't punish them at all for this. And Maharaj says, what more could I do? He says they gave up their consciousness, in smoking the ganja. What worse thing could I do to them than that? That's that wisdom of knowing that our vice is its own punishment. If we feel like we have to heap on more punishment, then we have a slight belief that it was actually enjoyable, or that there was actually something good or something beguiling in that experience. But Maharaj, he knew that the vice itself is our punishment. We give up that awareness. We give up that consciousness of the moment. And that is its own punishment. And that's really what we should understand, about our vices. We shouldn't kick ourselves around the block with any of the bondages like shame or, remorse and regret. No point in that. Just understand. The thing itself was the punishment. And when you come to understand that, then you're moving closer to knowing the perfection of self, how the perfection of self is the thing itself, is the place to reside. And anything that we do that takes us out of that recollection, out of that sense of existence, there's nothing worse you could do. No need to punish yourself. You've already punished yourself. You've already gone as far into pain as you need to go. But he's talking about here that when you become habitual, you no longer are aware that you're in pain. You start taking care of your pain with more distraction. That's part of where addiction comes from. You smoke that ganja, and you keep doing it, and you keep doing it, and you keep doing it, and you have a feeling of, you just get accustomed to it. And after a while, you're no longer aware that you've left your reality. You're not even aware of it anymore. And that's when he says you're close to death, even a spiritual death. It's like you're becoming unaware, and you're accepting unawareness as normal. And that's one of the reasons that our practice is so important. Because in that practice, we're constantly reminded of the ideal and of what is normal, that enlightenment is in fact normal, that this ignorance that we live in, that we've accepted as human, that we've even accepted as an attribute of ourself, God forbid, this is what we've done. And that's why in our practice, we're constantly in the presence. So we become aware of this loss of consciousness. We become aware of the price of ignorance. So it is absolutely necessary for everyone to believe in nothing. But I do not mean voidness. There is something, but that something is something which is always prepared for taking some particular form, and it has some rules or theory or truth in its activity. This is called Buddha nature, or Buddha himself. So look, he's got another word here for Atman. That's heresy, but it's in fact what he's pointing at here, that this void, this emptiness, this silence that we experience through our practice is not nothingness. that it's the fullness. I love the way Brother St. John of the Cross talks about it, as I've mentioned, that the darkness of the night. He says there is no darkness in the night. The night sky is pregnant with billions of suns. Every star is a sun, and all of the light shining in the firmament. He says, what is that darkness? That darkness, that stillness, that void is nothing there to reflect the light. The light just passes through. There's no ego. And so there's no world. Right? And so that darkness, that void, that emptiness of the Buddhists, that silence of the Jnani is the infinite light, with no ego to reflect it, with nothing in the way, just passes through. And so it remains unmanifest, but is the very nature of potential itself, because within it lies just everything. All love, all peace, Satchitananda, everything that we've ever longed or dreamed of lies in that void, in infinite quantity, in infinite fulfillment, but no ego to block it, to avoid it, to darken it, to dim it. This is called Buddha nature, or Buddha himself. When this existence is personified, we call it Buddha. When we understand it as the ultimate truth, we call it Dharma. And when we accept the truth and act as the part of the Buddha, or according to the theory, we call ourselves Sangha. But even though there are 3 Buddha forms, it is one existence which has no form or color, and it is always ready to take form and color. This is not just theory. This is not just the teaching of Buddhism. This is the absolute necessary understanding of our life, right? And that sentence could be written in any religion. This is the truth. The removal of ego, and to manifest the divine nature uninhibited by ego, by a smaller self, by our attractions and our aversions, to be able to minimize them, at least. Ideally, of course, to have them completely vaporize, is the goal of all religion. When Paul says, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me, he's saying the exact same thing as what Suzuki just said about Buddha. And seeing Mother everywhere is the same practice. Having Mother manifest in you, that you resign yourself to your chosen ideal, and your chosen ideal then is the operator of your body and mind. You are just the instrument. Same idea, the exact same truth, manifesting in all traditions for us. It is our ideal to get out of the way, so that this love can manifest purely and freely and infinitely in us. I don't know what's going on with me. I'm sorry. This is the absolute necessary understanding of our life. Without this understanding, our religion will not help us. We will be bound by our religion, and we will have more trouble because of it. That's what fundamentalism is. That's what fundamentalism is. When ego becomes identified with religion, then we're in big trouble. And we see that in the world all the time, and we always have. It's not anything special these days. It's been the bane of religion since the beginning. And it's one of the reasons that Vivekananda struggled so much with whether or not the order should organize or not, whether it should organize into an institutional movement or not. He really, really, really painfully struggled over whether that should be done or not. And in the end, he decided that for its propagation, for the message of Thakur to go forward, that it would have to be done. But he knew that it was a sacrifice because of this, That when we become ego invested in our path or our truth or our religion, when it becomes an object for us, an object of enjoyment, then, because of its immensity, it can cause horrendous ego problems where you think my way is the best way, my way is the only way. People who aren't on my way are of a certain evil or of a certain darkness. When we become thinking that way, anytime there's separation, that there's ego involved, always. Spirit always brings unity. And so that's why Thakur tells us as bhaktis, always tie your jnana in the corner of your dhoti. Don't forget the ultimate truth is one without a second. That's how we prevent becoming fanatics. That's how we begin. That's how we can transcend becoming attached to our path or to our truth. If you become the victim of Buddhism, I may be very happy, but you will not be so happy. So this kind of understanding is very, very, very important. So I like that way he worded that. If you become the victim of Buddhism, if you become the victim of Christianity, if you become the victim of Islam, if you become the victim of Vedanta, that is to be egoistically invested in your path, and you become a victim of your path. Yeah. You've now objectified it, and are building your sense of ego on it. While you are practicing Zazen, you may hear the rain dropping from the roof in the dark. Later, the wonderful mist will be coming through the big trees, and still later, when people start to work, they will see the beautiful mountains. I'm not sure yet what he's meaning, but boy, what an ideal that is, that slowly through our practice, as you sit, we begin in one place, which may be focused on the discipline and on the need for sitting there for an hour and the need for being controlled and not having your knees hurt, not having your hips hurt, not having your butt hurt. That may be the beginning, but slowly then you catch a little something. You're like, oh, that's very nice. That's very nice. And then in that silence, you sit there, you become more composed in that silence. Oh, what was that? That was wonderful. And you sit there and it just keeps growing, so you see this ever increasing beauty, awareness of beauty. First, just the sound of raindrops on the roof, but then it gets vaster and you see the wonderful mist coming through the trees. And then you sit there and it's still later, they'll see the beautiful mountains beyond, this hint of infinity, which somehow mountains always inspire, just like the ocean. So this is our unfolding practice, ever increasingly beautiful and wonderful, wonderful. But some people will be annoyed if they hear the rain when they are lying on their beds in the morning, because they do not know that later they will see the beautiful sun rising from the east, right? We get caught in our defined moment. We get stuck in our aversions and our attractions of the moment. We can't get out of that ego. We can't accept the pain in our hips as we sit. We can't accept the discipline that we have to do, and the discipline stays a focus, right? We don't let go and go higher. We stay in these little whirlpools. We believe them to be real, is what happens. And we take them on as identity, and we live in opposition. Sometimes the opposition to the moment becomes our definition of self. And that's a horrible place to be. Always an agitated person, always a bitter person. When opposition to the moment, when you're constantly desiring something different than what is. And that's just a terrible, terrible, terrible existence. And I was going to say half of people live that way. The other half lives in the past in a constant sense of remorse, regret, sorrow, and weakness. Those living in the sense of future are always in a state of anxiety, desire for change, irritation at the moment, discontent in the moment. So that's why we're trying to Get rid of the desires that are creating your future and get rid of your attachments that are creating your past. Stop the story that happens when the two mix, and sit right smack in the middle, balanced perfectly on that razor's edge of the moment in the presence of the beloved divine, and see things as they are, as they pass from the future of desires across the screen of your present and fall into the attachments of the past. And just watch that happen. Be unaffected by it. Know that it has nothing to do with you. You are the container of all that arises and falls. If our mind is concentrated on ourselves, we will have this kind of worry. Yeah. You know, if you can't let go, that's what causes all of life's struggle, all of life's story, is simply because of attachment, simply of not being able to bring the mind out of the future and out of the past and to place it squarely in the emptiness of the moment. Everything in life, all troubles, all sorrows, all discontents come from that alone. But if we accept ourselves as the embodiment of the truth, or Buddha nature, we will have no worry. And oddly enough, that's the whole struggle, is to accept ourselves as Buddha nature and to stop defining ourselves as anything else, right? We are without definition, and the self without definition is Buddha nature. It's Thakur, it's Ma, it's Jesus, it's infinite light. And for you to stop insisting that you're small, for you to stop insisting that you're guilty, for you to stop insisting that you need anything, that's to accept yourself as pure light, as Satchitananda, infinite wisdom, infinite purity, infinite freedom, infinite love. We will think, now it is raining, but we don't know what will happen in the next moment, right? That's how you stay young. That's how you stay young. Stop thinking you know what's going to happen in the next moment. That's where boredom comes from. Making wrong assumptions, assuming that you know anything about the future is what causes old age. That's what calcifies the mind, and you're no longer able to accept anything that comes. You're no longer open to the fresh newness. Everything gets pushed into its boxes immediately, even before it can be experienced. That's when we become old. That's when the immortal self grows old. But to be open to accept you're not old, accept it. Accept that as a fact. That's to accept your Buddha nature, accept your immortality as reality. And then you can look in the mirror and laugh. Like everybody else does when they look at you. You can accept these things and not be attached to them. You know, I think that's one of the wonderful things in old age. If you accept it, because she's really just trying to get you to detach. So she takes all of your beauty and turns it into whatever it becomes in old age. It becomes an inner beauty if you're doing it right. People love you for something much deeper than the way you look or present. They start loving you because of what you are in their life. That's knowing Buddha nature. That's accepting yourself as the immortal and letting the body do what it does, letting the hair do what it does, and enjoying the ride, never knowing what's coming next because you never let your sense of adventure, the anticipation of the manifestation of the divine, always present, everywhere perfect. When you accept the moment that way, that's what he's talking about. Accept it as perfect. You are as you are, perfectly, and let it be. By the time we go out, it may be a beautiful day or a stormy day. Since we don't know, let's appreciate the sound of the rain right now. That's being present. Don't worry about your anxieties of the future. Enjoy the moment as it is. Whatever is coming, it even can be pain or unpleasant. Let it come and be amazed that you can feel pain. Be amazed that there's suffering. all of those things are pointing at something amazing, your own existence, your own isness, Satchitananda. To feel, no matter what comes to you is pointing at that reality. That's to accept your nature. That's to accept what you are. This kind of attitude is the right attitude. If you understand yourself as a temporal embodiment of the truth, you will have no difficulty whatsoever. You will appreciate your surroundings, and you will appreciate yourself as a wonderful part of Buddha's great activity, even in the midst of difficulties. This is our way of life. This is what we are. We are never discombobulated by what happens. That's that equanimity, that composure. That's, when I think of Jesus in the storm, he was on a boat in the Sea of Galilee and a big storm blows up and the boat's in danger of sinking. I mean, it's taking on water. And all the disciples are running around on the deck, just, doing exactly what they do, just terrified and trying to get everything, the sails set and whatever you have to do on a boat when it's in a storm. I have no idea. But they're running around doing it all. And finally, one of the disciples runs down to get Jesus, to get help. Jesus is asleep in his room. he's sleeping in the middle of a huge storm in a boat. So he's sleeping. They get him up and they bring him upstairs. And he's looking around. He's like, what's the problem? And they're like, help us. Can't you see? And Jesus looks out and he puts his hand out and calms the storm. And immediately the storm is gone. The sea is calm and the boat is drifting. And he tells them, he says, oh, you of little faith. God was always here. I was always present. What is this? Nothing is as it seems. That's how we live. That's our practice. We understand in all the storms and all the stillness, there is only that peace of the divine within. That's when the Gita tells you your soul is ever free, ever pure, cannot be brained, cannot be wetted, cannot be pierced, cannot be burned. That's what he's saying. Walk around and enjoy the storm. Even if it's danger, enjoy the danger. And you say, enjoy the danger. What are you talking about? Like, well, that's exactly what every roller coaster ride in the world is about. Enjoying the danger from the perspective of being safe. That's what all the roller coasters in the world are about. And in a funny way, that's what life is about. Your safety is your soul, yourself. Your safety is your oneness with the divine. Your acceptance of what you are, immortal, ever free, ever pure, not the body, not the mind. You are ever safe and ever secure. This is how we live our life. This is how we transcend being small, being limited. Using the Buddhist terminology, we should begin with enlightenment and proceed to practice and then to thinking. Oof. Wow. Is that not exactly the opposite of what we normally think? Right? We think, we start with thinking and then we move to practice and then we move to enlightenment. He's saying, no. It's the other way around. That's why you have so much trouble. If you start with thinking, you think you're going to do something. If you start with thinking, you think you're the one that's going to make it happen, right? If you start with thinking, then your enlightenment becomes something you're going to attain. It's going to be an ego perspective. The ego perspective always starts with thinking, then goes to practice, and then goes to enlightenment. He's saying the reality is we start with enlightenment. So you sit down to accept that you are enlightened. You sit down to accept that perfection is already in you. You sit down to accept that you are the self, that you are ever free, that you are ever pure, that you are immortal. You start with your enlightenment, you accept it, and then you go on to practice it, letting it manifest in you. And then you move to thinking. You let it be what encourages your thoughts, what fills your thinking, what inspires your thinking. So it's the complete opposite of what we normally think from an egoistic perspective. that we start with thinking and then go to practice and then go to our enlightenment. No, no. With that, you'll always be in bondage. So we sit in our enlightenment, accepting that it's already done. We just haven't seen it yet. We just haven't known it yet. But we accept that it's real and existent within us. And so our practice then becomes enjoyment, really. It becomes an enjoyment of our time in our enlightenment, a time in our freedom, a time in our immortality, right? And our practice becomes our absorption in that. And our thinking becomes our manifestation of that, right? So very, very wonderful, wonderful thing he's saying here. Using the Buddhist terminology, we should begin with enlightenment, proceed to practice, and then to thinking. Usually thinking is rather self-centered. In our everyday life, our thinking is 99% self-centered. Why do I have suffering? Why do I have trouble? This kind of thinking is 99% of our thinking. For example, when we start to study science or read a difficult sutra, we very soon become sleepy or drowsy, but we are always wide awake, and we are very much interested in our self-centered thinking. But if enlightenment comes first, before thinking, before practice, your thinking and your practice will not be self-centered. That's the whole point. That's everything. To escape the self-centeredness. Self-centeredness, that is the bars of your prison. Your ego is the bars of your prison, right? Is the bars of your prison. And you can't get out of prison just by your own will. Your own will is the bar, is the lock and key, actually, that keeps you in the prison. So you have to transcend the prison. You have to start with enlightenment. I am not imprisoned. I'm not a body. I'm not this mind. This is a dream. I'm ever free. I'm ever pure. By enlightenment, I mean believing in nothing. Believing in something which has no form and no color, which is ready to take form and color at any time. You know, so there's just this believing in nothing means empty mind. It means the ready mind, as he said in an earlier chapter. It's only through this empty mind that you can accept the moment as it is. If you don't have that empty mind, you'll define the moment based on a past, right? Or you'll define the moment based on a desire for the future. But to believe in nothing means to know that there is nothing that needs to be believed in. Believing is objectifying. It's taking something and making it particular and putting it in the mind. That's believing. But we have no particulars. Our ideal is one without a second. And so to believe nothing is to accept that there is nothing to be believed. To know that we are the container of all possibilities, all thoughts, all isnesses. We are the existence itself. And anything that arises in us passes in us, because each one is just a reflection of that infinity, an ephemeral symbol of that freedom that we are. This enlightenment is the immutable the immutable truth, the unchanging truth. Satchitananda, that one without a second, that is the immutable change, the absolute. God as love, God as wisdom, God as existence. Not the owner of those things, the isness of those things. He is the is of isness, right? So I'll say that my favorite thing again, God is not loving. God is love itself. God is not wise. God is wisdom itself. God does not exist. God is existence itself. And the beautiful thing in that is that you understand our part in it is the manifestation. So God is love. God is love. We are loving. We are that image of God. We are the manifestation of God. So God is love. We are loving. God is wisdom. We are wise. God is. We exist. So we are the verb of God's unchanging self. We are the manifestation of the absolute, the expression of the absolute in movement. And it's such a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful understanding of these things to know that, because like I often say, then you can take your love as your evidence of God in you. You can take your wisdom, your wiseness, as accept it as the calling card of the beloved. You can take your existence as your evidence of the very presence of your divine with you, right? So it's how you can know that God will never separate from you. Because if he separated from you, you'd be gone. You wouldn't be here. So stop with the lie in the mind that God is somewhere separate from you. If God was not intimately connected with you, your existence wouldn't be. Your ability to see and express love would not exist. Your ability to learn and grow, to be wise, would not be possible. We would all be in one eternal spin cycle with no hope of freedom if this was not true, you know. So it's a beautiful, fundamental truth of our existence. By enlightenment, I mean believing in nothing, believing in something which has no form, no color, which is ready to take form and color. This enlightenment is the immutable truth. It is on this original truth that our activity, our thinking, and our practice should be based. So it's just a reiteration of what he's saying. We begin with enlightenment. We move to practice. We move to thinking, right? It all comes from our knowledge of ourself as the Atman. All right. How's that for a perfect length of a chapter? All right, everybody, unmute yourself for whatever reason. A comment? Amazing, isn't it?
There's nothing to say anymore. No.
That's the way it should be. That's when you know that you're getting in the right place. You feel disinclined to say or to speak, even to ask. You know, Swami Damodarananda, we talked in the past, he lived with Ramana Maharshi for 2 years before. He told some great stories. I should try and find that actually. He typed out his experience in those 2 years, and it's wonderfully mystical. It's just delightful to read. But one of the things he said was that while he was practicing as a brahmachari, he would write down all of his questions that he would have as he studied, and then he would go for his time with Ramana Maharshi, and he would sit down in front of Ramana Maharshi. He said first of all, the questions would disappear from his mind. They seemed absurd. They seemed utterly unimportant. And he would just sit there and enjoy that peace, that wonder of just the stillness of being in Ramana Maharshi's presence. And he would forget that he even had questions. The silence was so pure, was so sweet. And he said, I never got a single question answered, but all my questions disappeared. Which I thought was wonderful, a wonderful way. It's like in the dream, in the dream you can wonder, how am I flying? How am I flying? What's the physics of this? How is it possible? But then you wake up, you don't even think for a second, how was I flying in the dream? How is that possible? The questions just dissolve of their own accord because they belonged to the apparatus of ignorance. They didn't belong to what you are. And so when you become aware of what you are, the questions, answered or not, become as unimportant as the physics of a dream. You just don't, just doesn't matter. That will be the ultimate perspective of freedom. Yeah. So,
Thank you very much.
yes, yes. All right, everyone.
Thank
Jai
you,
Ma,
Maharaj.
Jai Thakur, Jai Swamiji, Jai Buddha, Jai Krishna, Jai Jesus, Jai you.